It's a Saturday afternoon in 1967. You're 16, and you've been saving up your allowance for 3 weeks. The bell above the door chimes as you push into Sam's Records on State Street, and immediately you're surrounded by it. The smell of vinyl, the sound of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper playing through the store speakers. The sight of thousands of albums arranged in wooden bins that seem to stretch forever. You flip through the 45s first, running your fingers over the familiar labels. Motown, Atlantic, Capitol. Each record is a small square of possibility. 3 minutes of music that might change your life. Behind the counter, Sam looks up from the invoice he's checking. He's got gray hair and thick glasses, but he knows every song that's been recorded in the last 20 years. Looking for anything special today? He asks. You pull out a crumpled piece of paper where you've written down the name of a song you heard on the radio last night. Sam nods knowingly, disappears into the maze of records, and returns with exactly what you need. As you hand over your carefully counted bills and coins, you realize this isn't just a purchase, it's a moment of discovery, a transaction that connects you to something larger than yourself. This was the record store. For 30 years, from the 1950s through the early 1980s, it was where American musical culture lived and breathed. It was where you discovered new artists, where you searched for rare recordings, where you spent hours just listening and learning. It was democracy in action. Anyone could walk in, anyone could find something that spoke to them, and everyone left knowing more about music than when they arrived. The golden age of record stores began in the post-war boom of the 1950s. As teenagers gained spending power and rock and roll exploded onto the scene, record shops transformed from quiet corners of electronic stores into vibrant cultural centers. The introduction of the 45 revolutions per minute single in 1949 revolutionized music buying. Suddenly, kids could afford to buy individual songs rather than entire albums. A 45 cost under $1, making music accessible to teenagers with limited allowance money. The record store was an education in itself. The bins were organized by genre, but the real learning happened through exploration. You'd start in the rock section, drift into R&B, discover jazz, maybe even venture into classical. The physical act of flipping through records created accidental discoveries. An interesting cover might catch your eye, a familiar musician's name on an unfamiliar album, a record label you'd learn to trust. This kind of serendipitous discovery shaped musical taste in ways that no algorithm could replicate. The knowledge of record store employees was legendary. These weren't just retail workers, they were musical encyclopedias who lived and breathed music. They could tell you which pressing of a Blue Note album had the best sound quality, explain the difference between mono and stereo versions, or recommend an obscure B-side that would become your new favorite song. Regular customers developed relationships with store owners who learned their tastes and would set aside new releases or rare finds. The ritual of record buying was as important as the music itself. Saturday afternoons were prime time, when teenagers would make their weekly pilgrimage to browse new releases. You'd save up for a specific album, but might leave with something completely different after spending an hour listening at the store's turntables. Many shops had listening booths where you could preview albums before buying. Different stores developed distinct personalities. Some specialized in classical music, others focused on the latest pop hits. Underground record shops emerged in college towns, specializing in imports and rare pressings. These stores became gathering places for serious music fans who would spend hours discussing obscure releases. The album cover art was crucial to the record store experience. In an era before music videos or internet images, the album cover was often your first impression of an artist. Record stores displayed their best sellers face out, creating visual landscapes of musical culture. The artwork became iconic, instantly recognizable designs that defined entire eras of music. Browsing through album covers was like walking through an art gallery where every piece came with its own soundtrack. The social aspect of record store culture was profound. Music fans would recognize each other by their purchases, striking up conversations about shared tastes. Store owners often knew their customers' musical preferences better than family members did. Special releases would create events. Fans would line up for limited editions or imported albums that might sell out in hours. The record store was where you learned about upcoming concerts, discovered new bands, and connected with a community of people who shared your passion for music. Regional differences were significant. Detroit stores specialized in Motown and soul. Nashville shops focused on country and bluegrass. San Francisco stores were known for psychedelic rock. New York had everything, from jazz specialists to punk rock stores. These regional personalities reflected local music scenes. The technology of vinyl created its own culture. Record collectors learned to spot first pressings and check for scratches. The liner notes on album covers became required reading, providing context that deepened appreciation for the music. Record stores also served as informal concert venues. Many shops hosted in-store performances, giving customers intimate access to musicians. These acoustic sets often became legendary among fans, rare opportunities to see famous artists in tiny spaces, performing stripped-down versions of their hits. Store signings were major events, with artists meeting fans and signing album covers that would become treasured possessions. The decline began subtly in the late 1970s, but accelerated rapidly through the 1980s. Several factors converged to undermine the traditional record store business model. The introduction of the cassette tape changed how people consumed music. Tapes were smaller, more portable, and more durable than vinyl, but they also encouraged home recording and sharing that cut into record sales. The rise of chain stores altered the economics of music retail. Large chains like Tower Records could buy inventory in massive quantities, offering lower prices than independent shops. They also had more buying power with record labels, getting better terms and exclusive releases. The personal service and musical expertise that made independent stores special became less important when customers could save money at chain stores. Radio programming became more standardized, reducing the diversity of music that received airplay. This meant fewer new artists for record stores to introduce to customers. The discovery aspect that had been central to record store culture was being replaced by mass marketing. The shopping mall revolution moved retail out of downtown areas where many record stores were located. Young people who had traditionally walked to neighborhood record shops now drove to suburban malls, where music was just one option among many retailers. The cultural centrality of the record store was diluted when it became part of a larger entertainment complex. Home recording technology improved dramatically, making it easier for people to share music without purchasing it. While home taping wasn't new, better equipment made higher quality copies possible. Record labels fought back with home taping is killing music campaigns, but the practice continued to grow. MTV and music television changed how people discovered music. Instead of browsing record store bins, fans could see videos and learn about new artists through television. This visual element made the audio-only experience of record stores feel outdated. The compact disc, introduced in 1982, initially boosted record sales but ultimately changed the retail landscape. CDs were smaller and more durable than vinyl, requiring less storage space. However, they also cost more to produce and purchase, changing the economics of music buying. Store margins became increasingly tight as competition intensified. Record labels offered smaller discounts to retailers. While production costs rose, many independent stores found themselves unable to compete with chains that could absorb losses in music sales. The personal relationships that had sustained many record stores began to break down as ownership changed hands and knowledgeable staff left. New employees often lacked the deep musical knowledge that had made record stores special. By 1985, the transformation was largely complete. Many legendary independent record stores had closed or been absorbed by chains. The remaining independents often specialized in specific genres or served particular communities. But the era of the neighborhood record shop as a cultural center had ended. The casual browser, the weekend regular, the teenage music fan discovering new sounds, they were all shopping elsewhere. What disappeared with the traditional record store was more than just a retail model. It was an entire approach to musical discovery and appreciation. Record stores had been democratic institutions, where musical knowledge was shared freely, and expertise was respected regardless of formal education or social status. The teenager saving allowance money received the same attention and respect as the serious collector spending hundreds of dollars. The physical interaction with music was also lost. Holding an album, reading the credits, studying the artwork, and placing the needle on the record created a relationship between listener and music that digital formats couldn't replicate. The large format of albums allowed for artistic expression and detailed information that became impossible with smaller formats. The social aspects of record store culture had no real replacement. While music fans found new ways to connect through magazines and later the internet, the immediate personal interaction of record store culture was unique. The shared experience of discovery, the recommendation from a knowledgeable clerk, the chance encounter with another fan, these spontaneous connections became much rarer. Record stores had also served as informal archives of musical culture. Rare recordings, out-of-print albums, and regional releases were preserved in store inventories and private collections. When stores closed, much of this material was scattered or lost, making certain recordings nearly impossible to find. The expertise that record store employees possessed represented decades of accumulated musical knowledge that couldn't be easily replicated. These individuals knew not just what was popular, but what was significant, influential, and worth preserving. Their recommendations introduced countless fans to music they might never have discovered otherwise. Modern music retail, dominated by digital downloads and streaming services, has gained convenience but lost the human element that made record stores special. The ability to instantly access millions of songs is remarkable, but it lacks the personal guidance, serendipitous discovery, and community aspects that made record shopping a cultural experience rather than just a commercial transaction. If you remember the weight of an album in your hands, the anticipation of hearing a new record for the first time, or the satisfaction of finding a rare recording you'd been seeking for months, you remember a time when music was more than background noise, it was a passion worth pursuing, a culture worth participating in, and a community worth joining. Where was your record store? Do you remember the first album you bought there? The clerk who introduced you to a favorite artist? The smell of vinyl and the sound of music playing while you browsed? Those details matter because they represent a time when discovering music was an adventure, when expertise was valued, and when a simple record purchase could change how you heard the world.